Hello, hello, hello. This is Danny Ceballos with Unleashed Consulting and the Best Boss Bootcamp podcast. Welcome, dear listener. Very excited to have our guest today, friend and colleague for a number of years. This is Lisa Duerre. Lisa, can you just get on and just say hello
Hey,
so everybody
everybody.
can see and hear
Happy
you
to
right
be
now?
here.
Yes. So let me tell you a little bit about Lisa, and then we'll get into some good questions and answers. Lisa and I have known each other for a few years, and I want to tell you I was just inspired by a podcast that I heard her on not too long ago where she talked about some of her challenges in the work that she's doing and the life that she's leading, which is both aspirational, inspirational, and something that I've been following Lisa for a bit and will continue to follow her. So really eager to get to her message here. So Lisa Duerre is the co-founder and the CEO of RLD Group. It's a certified WENC, which is a
Women's
women's.
Business
Tell me what
Enterprise.
WENC is. And, yeah, coaching collective, helping tech companies take culture transformation out of the clouds, banish burnout, and drive bottom line results. Lisa spent over 20 years in Silicon Valley and has been featured on NBC, CBS, ABC, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Lead Magazine, FeedSpot, Thrive Global, Authority Magazine. Let me take a breath. Romper, The Mercury News, and more. Lisa is also the host of the amazing podcast called Ctrl+Alt+Delete with Lisa Duerre. It's a top 10 podcast on technical leadership. She is also raising awareness for women living with
Lipidema.
Say it for me. Lipidema. I keep wanting to say lipidema. Lipidema, a disease affecting 1 out of 9 women. Welcome, Lisa. I'm wondering, before we get into some questions, is there anything else that you want to tell us about your life, who you are, what brought you to this place, anything
Danny.
before we get going?
First of all, dude, I'm so excited to be here. Okay. That's number one. Number two, it's so interesting to hear me talked about when you read. It's like, wow, we're on a mission. It's cool. It's exciting. So I'm a mom. I'm a daughter. I'm a business owner. I got engaged at a Phil Collins concert in the front row. That'll age me for all your listeners. Like, who's Phil Collins? You want to know. And I'm really, really, really excited to be here today because the work that you're doing, Danny, and what you do with Best Boss Bootcamp and who you serve, they are the center. They're the nucleus of everything.
Yeah.
So I feel like we need to, give some
Love it.
love and bear witness to that. And the other thing you don't know is there's an eyelash loose. I can tell you that much. There's something in my eye.
Well, Lisa, you can't help it. You're looking
Thank you. They're
fabulous.
not
So
even
that's
falsies.
just
It's my own
awesome. They are,
eyelashes, and they're
they're
like,
big.
they're assaulting me right now. Yes, here we are. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and I really love it that you, as a friend, a colleague, and a guest, really get that what this podcast is, which is really to work with, the core of our workforce, which is management and leadership. Oftentimes, it's middle management caught in the middle between a rock and a hard place. Lisa, I know you do a lot of work, or the focus of your work is with tech companies and tech leaders. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what are some of the pressures that you see your folks, your clients, your audience facing? Because I think it'll be a lot very similar to what my folks are facing.
So right now, I mean, we live in a BANI world, Danny, right? It's brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. I mean, VUCA is vamos. We're in
Love that.
BANI, people. The word of the year is
Yeah.
permacrisis. That's what's going on right now. So when you think about middle managers and leaders in the middle, right, they're dealing with all of that every day, whether it's tech or nonprofit. I don't care. What I see in my space is
Yeah.
this constant, always on, never good enough, will replace you tomorrow vibe. And for anyone reading the news, there's things going on every day with layoffs and reorgs. And I feel like the middle gets stuck with all of the execution and very little of the ownership of the decision, and lots of survivor guilt. And at the same time, stress on an unbelievable level because it's like, what's next? What is going to happen next? And I just really, really appreciate the complexities in the world that they are leading in because they have a little bit of power and are we cussing on this podcast? Is it okay? We have a shit ton of
Yes, we are.
responsibility
Yes, we
and a
are.
little bit of power.
Yeah, yeah. What do we do with that? What do you do with that with your clients and your folks? That's it. You're tapping it
Yeah,
exactly.
I
So
think the
what do we
first
do
thing is
with
to
that?
recognize yeah,
What do
I
we
think
do
the
with
first thing
those
is to
folks
recognize
that
when you're giving your power away. I think burnout because we would talk a lot about burnout
Mhm,
in tech, right? Burnout, one thing that happens in burnout is you forget how much power you have. And even the word power can feel dirty to
mhm,
people, but fundamentally, Danny, you have your knowledge
mhm,
power. Like tech is filled with knowledge, right? You have your PhD in electrical engineering and you're the expert, right? But there's other sources of power that you actually control that the organization doesn't give you. They may give you the title and they may give you the resources, but inside, right? What's your brand? What are the
yes,
relationships that you're building? Who are you helping and serving and not just taking from? Are you playing the game with ethics and
mhm,
integrity? Right? All of those moments matter. And then thinking about in my opinion, our model is called firm, where you are flexible, intuitive, resilient, and mindful. Like those are the leaders that are going to survive and thrive. And to take your power back is to figure out where can you be flexible for yourself and your team, right? What is your intuition telling you? Even if no one, if you can't be in a room with people, you can still read things, right? And are you being mindful? Are you
mhm,
taking good care of
mhm.
yourself? Because when you're always on, never good enough, and stressed out to the max, you're not going to make really good decisions, and that's going to impact everybody.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. That's yeah. That seems to be a running theme with a lot of. No matter who I'm talking to on this podcast, we come back to getting clearer on your own inner resilience and tapping into that, building that, nurturing that. I mean, it's this, I use this analogy all the time. I'm sure you do too. It doesn't do any good to put the oxygen mask on others when we haven't put it on ourselves first. We're going to just burn out just by helping somebody in the most
Yeah.
minimal kinds of ways. So one of the things that you talked about was finding the power that we have within that's not so obvious,
Mhm.
including you said branding. So I know a lot of folks might be confused about, well, I'm in a nonprofit
Oh,
healthcare.
you
How
want to
do I
talk about
brand
brand?
myself? What does that mean?
Yes, let's talk about brand, right?
Yes,
Listen,
please
brand,
tell me.
it's not, it's a marketing term, but no, we all have a brand. You either control it or it controls you. Right? Are you kind and say hello in the morning? Do you return emails when you say you're going to? Would you follow through on your commitments? Are you on camera on Zoom or not? And are you clear about why? Are you flexible in how you show up to
Mm,
problem solving? Do you blame? Right? Like, what are the questions you ask? Are you a curious leader? All of that builds your brand. Right? It's your reputation. And you
mm,
can leave
mhm,
it to others, or you can get
mhm,
really clear and think, what do I want to embody? Who do I want to be? And who do I
mhm,
aspire to be like? And what are they doing? And really working toward that. I mean,
mm.
yes, it's about you how you dress and how you speak. I say dude, it's part of my brand, right? But I'm gonna tell you something, in my
This is
early
right.
years in
Yeah.
HR, I didn't say dude, and I certainly didn't say shit ton of responsibility, right? So my brand back then was uptight and not relatable. If you can believe that, Danny, because you and I have become fast friends, right? But in the
No, I
beginning, I was
can't.
like,
Yeah.
I'm in HR. I should act and walk and talk a certain way. And my boss at the time said, people don't trust you because they can't figure out who you are. Right? And I'm
And
like,
that was your
"Oh,
brand,
hell no. I
right?
am the most trustworthy person on the planet." So,
Mm.
I think I need to express myself in a way that is relatable, and also, I grew up in Southern California, and dude is part of my vernacular, you know? So, I
Yes,
show up now
yes,
in that way, and I think
yes.
that that's it's not a shtick, it's really who I am.
Yes, it's yes. So full authenticity, awesome, but a real consciousness around what you're gaining and what you're giving up by being in
Yeah,
that authenticity, right? And that's your brand. And I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing, part of what you're saying is, a brand can somebody can brand
totally.
you, or you can brand yourself, right? If I can brand myself, then you respond to that brand. Yeah, I think it's really, I've had a lot of conversations with guests around what does
Mhm.
authenticity really mean? And I go back to, well, what's effectiveness? So figure out what your effectiveness is, and then mash up as much as you can your full authenticity, but without being a bull in a china
Oh,
shop with your
yeah.
authenticity. It's about being clear about the nuances, the way you need to brand yourself in order to get what you
Yeah. Oh my
want. I
gosh,
mean, it's
Danny, we
that
could do
simple
this
to
for
get what you
hours. I
want.
love so much about effectiveness because, for me, it was like, what did I care about? Well, I wanted my clients in HR to trust me. And
Yes.
if I'm not trustworthy because you can't read me, then I got to go figure that out. So I always go back to like, what do
Exactly.
you want to embody? What are your values? And then what's worked so far? Because when I drop an S word or a dude
Mm.
in a conversation, that seems to work. Right? But I ask permission. So you're bowling and China
Mhm,
shop. The first
mhm.
thing I asked you was, are we cussing today? Right? So
Yes.
I think part of it is being curious and reading the
Yes. Yep.
room and meeting the people where they are in that culture and not just forcing, an F-bomb on
Yes.
somebody either. I mean, a well-placed F-bomb in my mind,
Yes.
nothing better, but that doesn't always work.
Yeah. Yeah. I I agree 100%, and I think I think that's a really strong message for my listening audience, which again tend to be core middle managers caught between a rock and a hard place. And I say core meaning the core
Totally.
of an organization, like the core of a body. Yeah, and doing the inventory on your head about what is most important to you, where your value set is, and then putting it against what is most effective. What do you want? Because there may be some tailoring in there, but that's fine. That's still, in my book, that's still authenticity. And maybe it's more nuanced and measured, but it's clear, it's clear on what
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want,
I'll
what
say
we
one
want,
last thing, I
right?
promise you, and we can go wherever you wanna go, but I feel like
No, you're
middle
fabulous. You're
managers are
fabulous.
caught in such a hard place with the word authenticity and vulnerability. Like, I love Brené Brown. Oh
Yes.
my god, I love
Yes.
her. And I think that middle
Yes.
managers are like, "It's not safe to be authentic or vulnerable. Are you freaking kidding me?" Right? I don't have all the insight and the data, but I'm
Mhm.
expected to execute everything, and I have all these people looking up to me, and I'm affecting their livelihood, their communities, their families every day with the decisions I make. So I can't walk around and go, "This plan sucks, but I have to make you do it," right? No, no, no. I feel like
Yep.
authenticity
No.
and vulnerability are really about the values and what you want to embody as a leader. So if you are having a hard time with this
Yes.
plan that you're supposed to execute on, it's not wise to be like, "Yeah, this plan sucks, let's do it anyway," right? It is wise to say, "You might be struggling with this vision. I can tell you I was too. Here's what I'm holding on to," right? Or here's what I see as good in this. And then look for something to hang your hat on as the leader to like embody that to move the team forward. But you're not going to walk around. It's not
Yeah.
authentic or
Yeah.
smart to be like, "Yeah, this plan sucks. Let's go," right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I might push back a little bit and say, yeah, you can be authentic, but it's certainly not smart. So, again, do you want to be effective? Then maybe that authenticity, right? So if my authenticity is to, I'm a nudist and I swear all the time and I like to, torture
Yeah, yeah.
cats. That's my, whatever. That's not what I'm going to be bringing
Mhm.
because it's not most
Yep,
effective.
and that
It's
goes
not what I
back to our
want.
leadership
So
brand. I
anyway,
full circle. Boom. It's what's your leadership brand? Do
yes,
you wanna be the
exactly,
nudist
exactly.
who's
So good.
torturing cats, or do you wanna be an effective leader who cares about their team, right? Because that's what you bring forward. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Unless you're
This is
leading
true, and this
nudists who like to
soundbite, I
torture
can
cats, in
only
which
imagine where this soundbite's going. Just saying, people, there's something before and after this moment right here. Dot, dot, dot.
yes, and I love cats.
I
I
love
think you need to
cats.
say that too.
Yes.
You love cats as well, right?
Yes, and
In
all
case
bodies are
anybody's
beautiful,
listening.
nude or clothed. It's all good.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So actually, that's a nice segue, I think, into something I really want to talk about, which is, part of what I wanted to talk to you about was how we work with the messages, the tapes, the mind frames, the things that we have going on in our head that are from our upbringing, from trauma at work, from trauma in our life, all those kinds of things. And I'm particularly interested in hearing not only your take on that and how you work with clients, but how you work on it with yourself, including this new chronic condition that was fairly recently
Mhm.
that you figured out. So can you just give us a little bit of backstory, what brought you to that revelation, and then maybe what you've done with, I think, some of the messages that I'm sure that you've
Mm,
been dealing with in your conscious and your subconscious mind
dude.
around being ill.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's a great transition, Danny, because I had to decide, am I going to talk about this as a leader? So I want to talk about authenticity and now vulnerability. I had to decide, I've made the choice that this is too important not to talk about. So thank you for the platform to even share this, right? Because I think the intersection of where I'm at in life as a leader and a CEO of a consulting firm and working with our clients is the intersection of leadership, right? And then what it really means to be inclusive and what it means to create a flexible work environment because of my newfound understanding of chronic illness, hidden disability, and medical conditions that go undiagnosed but are affecting you deeply. So whether it's long haul COVID, anxiety, diabetes, chronic fatigue, or my favorite, lipidema, right? All that is in common in that is that there's this amazing person that you're either leading or you love who is not telling you everything that's really going on and is trying to deal with it on their own, right? So my situation, here I am, I leave my corporate job and I launch our consulting firm. And at the time I had built our whole brand around the fact that I had burnt out in tech and then rebooted. And so I knew what it took and I knew how we get there. I still talk about it all the time. Part of my rebooting was I had lost, I think it was like 85 pounds. And I remember taking all the photos for our business and being like, I look like a CEO. I am in shape, right? I am confident. Look at me roar. And I was so excited because my outside image matched what I thought society said it should look like. Okay.
Yeah,
And
that's a
so
whole nother
here I am running
conversation.
off
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about burning out and rebooting and what it all means in health and nutrition and water and sleep hygiene and
Mhm.
all the things that I know to be true. And somehow my body was changing right before my eyes. And during the pandemic, I went into menopause. Lucky me, pandemic and menopause together. Great combo. But what happened is
Yeah,
I gained over 100
yeah.
pounds in less than, I would say, 18
Wow.
months. I quit tracking it because I was so shocked because I knew what to do. And so I felt like a fraud. Like, here I am talking about all this rebooting. I mean, we have a trademark, Ctrl+Alt+Delete. That's the reboot. Like, what? Ctrl+Alt+Delete with Lisa Duerre, our
Yeah,
podcast is trademarked for this, right, Danny? And here I am, like, shrinking behind the Zoom screen and
yes,
trying to find the clothes and trying to get the neck position right and what the hell? Exhausting. And I didn't
yes.
know what it was going on. So my point is, I wasn't being authentic at the time because I was so embarrassed that I had something happen to me and I didn't understand
Mm,
it, so I
mm,
blamed myself. I must be eating wrong, I must not be moving
mm,
enough, right? So, the limiting beliefs for, the connection to any leader right now is if you're struggling, whether it's rolling out a product or hiring a new person on your team, like, whatever story where you feel crappy about yourself, you have a moment to decide, are you gonna keep feeling crappy or you're gonna do something about it?
mm.
And I kept thinking it was under my control. I could just get this weight back off. Well, it won't come off because what turns out is I have a medical condition. It's a disease that was exacerbated in menopause. It also shows up in puberty and pregnancy, to the point where I was in a wheelchair and couldn't
Oh,
walk.
okay.
And I'm like a public speaker and like talking about health and wellness. And so the bottom line, I think of all of it, Danny, is that I decided once I realized what this was and that it affects 1 in 9 women, had I understood that this was something sooner, I could have done something about it. So I want to help people not get to where I was. And I want to help leaders understand that when you're dealing with something like this, or cancer, or high risk pregnancy, or elder care, the whole person is impacted. And it's not just about getting things out the door. Like, if you want this person to thrive, they need to understand that you get that they have other things going on too. So I
Mm,
don't know if I answered your
mhm,
question. I want to
mhm,
make sure I did.
mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. You did, and I so appreciate, I so appreciate the filter that you're putting it through, especially as you're still. I mean, my sense is you're
Oh, I'm
still
totally
trying to
still trying to
understand
understand
it
it.
in a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
ways. Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's been fairly recently, but I think the message is loud and clear for me and for listeners. Is we're all fighting. I think there's Rumi who said, everybody's fighting their
Mhm.
own war. Keep that in mind. Everybody, everybody, everybody. And of course, some are much more, damaging and injurious than others. But nevertheless, for leaders and managers I mean, is it too simple to say so two things. One is, as a leader and manager, I have my own war. So I heard you say, get a handle on it, or at least move towards understanding it so that you can manage it, as opposed to it
Yeah, for
managing you
sure.
forever and ever and ever. And the second thing, I think, is on the flip side for managers and leaders who are working with people, is to really keep working on, to go to Brene Brown, on that empathy muscle,
Mhm.
like super hard, right? Am I,
Yeah, no, I love how you
I'm
did
putting
that
that
because
together in my
I
head
tend
that way.
to, I'm in the messy middle, as they say, with this disease, right? And I'm
Yes.
also
Yeah.
working on
Okay.
honing the message, if you will. But I think if I, the one thing I would want to leave anybody with thinking about this right now is that you don't know what other people are going through. And we're all trying to act like we got our shit together. We all are, right? We want to keep our jobs. We want our partners to be happy. We want our kids to think we got it all figured out. Well, in the BANI world, in this perma crisis, let's just all admit we don't know what the hell is going to happen tomorrow. And let's be prepared that you might
Mhm.
find out you have a chronic disease your whole life and you didn't even know it. Or you might, whatever that is, that when you have that moment of self-doubt and judgment and shame, right? And fear, what comes into play of all of this, like, oh my God, I'm broken. What if people find out? What if we recognize we're all broken and we're all healing comes from all of us being more
Yes.
honest?
Yes.
So
Yes. 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 I love that. Yeah, and connecting around that. Yeah, absolutely. Lisa, one more question before I let you go, and I feel like we just, of course, just scratched the surface out of a whole bunch of things I wanted to talk with you about. So I'm hoping we can, bring you
Danny, I'll
back
come back
for
anytime.
another part
No
two at some
problem at
point.
all. Yes.
I was hoping. I thought we did. But we talked about in your last podcast I was listening to, you talked about a
Hmm.
hashtag, it's not my fault. Can you give a little bit of context around that and say what it means and
Yeah.
why it's so
Okay.
important?
Hashtag, it's not my fault. So what that was referring to when I was talking about it is that for so long, I've always thought that my weight problem was something I did to myself. And society says you need to look a certain way. Back to my story about when I launched our business. I was like, okay, I fit the mold, right? Come to find out with this disease and with many, there's nothing that I could have done to prevent from where I am. If I didn't know that I had it, to do anything about it. So when I met with the doctor to get the official diagnosis, he said, listen, there's shirts we make for people with your disease. Hashtag, it's not my fault. Because one of the biggest things you're going to go through is
Mm-hmm.
the unshaming and the unthinking, and you're going to reframe everything that your whole life you've done to yourself, beating yourself up for your weight. And we talked about the bias that society has on weight. If you're a fat leader, you must be lazy. If someone on your team is fat, they must not be productive, right? But Danny, right now, I don't fit comfortably in an airline seat. And I think I'm not lazy. It's not my fault I don't fit in that seat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's triggering for people because society says, well, eat less and move more, but not with my disease. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what? It's not my fault? So it was very
Mm-hmm.
liberating, and still every day I have to remind myself, I have it on a Post-it note because we're conditioned to take grand responsibility for our lives, right? As a leader, grand responsibility for your
Mm-hmm.
team.
Mm-hmm.
And yet,
Mm-hmm.
you get
Mm-hmm.
hacked and everyone, who's to blame? Who's to blame? Who's to blame? And maybe the hashtag it's not my fault might be instead, what's the right question, which is how do we fix it? What do we do now? How do we make it safer next time? I'm not saying you don't want to look back and blame. Blaming usually doesn't solve anything, Danny. Grace, compassion,
Mm-hmm.
curiosity, right? I love appreciative inquiry so much because it looks at the best of what was, what is, and what could be. And so I think anyone listening, you might ask yourself, where
Mm-hmm.
are you being super hard on yourself and where might you give yourself a little bit of grace?
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah, I was thinking as I was putting the kind of the notes together for this interview, I was like, "What?" So I remember really being impacted by hashtag It's Not My Fault when you were talking about it, but I couldn't quite remember. And I was like, "Does that mean that we're absolving ourselves of responsibility?" And it's not that. It's acknowledging, it's defining the reality for ourselves and not taking on those things that we and it's I know I'm making kind of a loose comparison here, but it's not taking on those things that I'm not responsible for, that
Yes.
I don't need to, right? So that it's whether it's it's a debilitating chronic
Mhm.
condition that one has, or it's it's
A million
generational
times
guilt,
over.
or
Yeah.
it's Right? Yeah. Or that my organization is putting this pressure on me saying, this thing is not happening when I don't have the resources for it. So it's not getting rid of the responsibility, it's defining the reality. And then, as you said, the most important, maybe the next hashtag is, so what do I do next? Or what am I going to do next? What am I going to do with this? Not my fault. It's
Yeah,
not
it's
enough to
not
just say
saying
it's not
like
my
I'm not
fault.
going to take
Yeah.
responsibility for it, but it's getting clear on what is in your control and what you've created.
Exactly.
Right? And being aware of all the
Yeah.
biases and messages that come at us that aren't ours. Because, middle managers take ultimate
Yeah. Right
responsibility,
on.
Danny.
Right
You
on.
and I both know this. And guess what? If middle managers told
Well,
to go do a layoff, they have had no input on it, but they have to go execute on it. One of the greatest gifts that they can give themselves is to see, okay, what am I going to embody and what am I going to do with the situation that's given to me? I think that's critical. And then the next thing is, what am I going to do next time so I can try and get ahead of this differently than this time?
Yes, I love that. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, and then it just right down to my core values, who I am, who I want to be, what my brand is, all of that. So then having that fit, what I want to, with
Yeah.
those values, what I want to do next. Um, can you give a little bit more information about your condition? A lot of my listeners are women identified, and I remember you saying, "Is this is not the easy." I mean, you didn't even know you had it
Right?
for a while. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what are the signs can women think about as
Yeah,
their
so, if
yeah.
you
Well,
gain and lose weight or you, have a very difficult time losing weight that you used to be able to lose, and it coincides with puberty, pregnancy, and menopause. So, the thing that I can
okay.
tell you for sure that always presented in me is my legs didn't look like anybody else's legs. So my legs were always thicker. I always called them cankles. Right? They're not there's actually a website, I don't even know if it exists anymore, but you say they're not cankles. I'm like, "Oh my god, there's a thing." So, like, trunk-like appearance, but there's a cuff.
Huh.
So, I could never wear boots. I was always jealous of
Oh,
people that could wear boots, but I was just too wide to fit. And so that's one telltale sign for people that have it in their legs. I have it in my arms as well. So your forearms are just, they don't fit in shirts correctly, right? If you're upsizing your shirt to fit your arms, you might have lipedema, right? I'm not, but it gets confused with obesity.
okay. Yeah.
And so people get really confused. But one of the signs, even on my arm, I don't know if you can see it. Do you see how it kind
Yes.
of cuffs out here? Let me hang on. We're gonna teach, right?
Yeah, a little
So,
bit.
this is
Yes.
not a normal forearm,
Right.
right? Can you see I don't know if you can see the ridges and the bumps, but these are all lipedema nodules. So it presents
Yes.
here. If
Yeah.
you can feel here
Now.
on your arm and you push, you're gonna feel nodules like rice. And so that's the lipedema fat that's in there.
Hmm.
I'm lucky enough to have it in my trunk.
Okay.
So my sister
Okay.
said, "Man, where'd you get that booty?" I'm like, "I don't know. I think after I had my daughter." Right? But I don't know that most
Huh.
people's butts get bigger after
Huh.
they have kids, but mine did because lipedema showed up. So it's
Because
cuffing.
of the yeah.
Cuffing and then just not
And
looking like
is the medical community pretty
no.
aware of this? Is this something that, this is one of those things that women have to kind of figure out,
You bring it to your
unfortunately, and then
provider,
bring to
people
their
don't understand
providers?
it,
Or
so this it's not talked about, and so I've literally educated my gynecologist, my dermatologist, my ophthalmologist, the person who did my mammograms, anybody that I can talk to who will listen, I say, "Do you know what lipedema is?" And they go, "Yeah, yeah, lymphedema." I said, "No, lipedema." And then I say,
Hmm,
"You're looking at it." And they go, "Hmm?" And so I do just like you, I kinda try and show
hmm,
and educate
hmm.
because before I'd wanna hide this and be like, "Oh, I don't want them to see me, I look fat." Now I'm like, "This isn't fat. This is a disease. We gotta talk about it," right? So yeah, most doctors don't know. It's
Mhm,
getting
mhm,
better, um, but it's as
mhm.
common as breast cancer, Danny. Yeah, and people don't even know how to pronounce
Wow,
it.
no kidding,
So,
huh. Wow, and
women.
it's just women, huh? It's just women identified, so it's something
Yes, I
okay,
think
so
it's,
and it's
I'm
hormonal
I'm not
related,
the
it
expert,
sounds
I'm
like,
learning along
things
as my journey too, but I think it's tied to estrogen.
okay, okay. I have to say, Lisa, and I know we're going over here, but I think this, and perhaps this can be what we can talk about next when I hopefully when I invite you back and you hopefully, yeah, is because we kind of sailed around it, but this notion of what
Mhm.
professional is, right? And what right and what the current Western culture, blah, blah, blah thing. And I think thankfully we're shifting a little bit on that and trying and understanding it. But I heard such pain and challenge from you as you were trying to fit this mold in order to brand yourself in the way that you thought you needed to be branded. And that, for me, that breaks my professional and personal heart. And it's actually something I've struggled with too. But oh, you're not professional enough. What does that mean?
I know.
What is that? That is so fair. That's not fair. That's based on your.
Oh, listen, I left corporate and pierced my nose. I was so excited to pierce my nose. Right? No one even knows my nose is pierced. I spent this whole lifetime of worrying about professional. I dyed my hair purple. And people are like, damn, your hair looks amazing. I landed my largest client deal the year I had purple hair. Right? And one of the things I've realized, and I don't want it now, I'm over that stage, but I did it and it felt so good. I think we limit ourselves. And I'm so grateful for the generations that have come and pushed us in this with tattoos and mohawks and, arm sleeves and whatever. Like when I grew up, if you had a tattoo, you were a Harley Davidson biker and you're supposed to run, right? Like that was my childhood growing up. Now I'm like, the coolest people I know have tattoos. Right?
It's so interesting. That evolves and changes.
Yeah, I remember in tech too, you never wore jeans back in the day, right? And now if you don't wear anything but jeans, you're not cool now. So I think it's just evolving and it takes people you have to get really clear about what matters. And I think that what I'd like to shift the game is my client, when I told him what was going on, I said, I'm really worried I'm not going to get hired because nobody wants to see a fat woman on stage. Right? And he was like, my client, fuck you. We don't hire you for your looks. We hire you for your knowledge and your heart. Don't ever say that again. Right? I was like, but that's like a real thing. That's how many fat public speakers do you know? Right? And I'm not really fat. I have a disease, but people are going to call me fat. So we could talk about this for days.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's hopeful because there's new conversations about what is professional, what is work, all of that. And it's tragic in a lot of ways because like you said, we put ourselves in these, others put us in these boxes and then we have no choice but to be in that box.
And that goes back to taking our power back, right? Your personal power.
Yes. And let's end on that note. So that's a positive note, right? And so what's the one thing listeners can do or should do, or besides looking for you and getting in contact with you, and you can tell us how to do that in a moment, what else do you think our listeners should do as soon as they hang up this this podcast?
I learned this thing a long time ago where you do an inventory of your friends, right? I use LinkedIn for this a lot. Like, ask people what they think of you. What do they admire about you? What is it about you that, is your superpower? Build your brand through other people's lenses who will give it to you straight. And you just ask, how do you just, if you were talking about me with someone else, how would you describe me? I guarantee you, no one describing me that is inspired by me is going to say, oh, she's that fat woman talking about lipidema. Like, no, they're going to be like, she brings her heart. She says, dude, or whatever. So ask people that love and respect you, how they describe you, and let that help inform how you see yourself. That's one. And then number two, which is a very strategic move on your part, is go on LinkedIn and go ask for some recommendations. It's built in for you. Right? Offer someone else a recommendation that you admire, ask for a couple of years and see what people say about you. You'd be amazed at how awesome you are that you're missing because you're stuck in it.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. And I do think it takes a little bit of courage, but I like that a lot, right? To kind of open up that all those blind spots we have by asking for, unfiltered feedback. And then, like you said, a recommendation is a recommendation. So we get, but
and I'll say, if you're afraid to ask anybody anything and it's just too big for you, you can ask yourself, think of a high point story in your life where you felt lit up in your purpose and as authentic as you've ever been. And then look for themes, right? Because you don't have to ask anybody that one. You can just ask, just reflect back on your life. When have you been lit up, most authentic, and had the best results? And that's going to give you some insight too.
Love it. Lisa, where can people find you if they want to follow you or hear a little bit more about RLD Group? Or,
listen, easy. RLDGroupLLC.com is our website. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post things constantly. You can link with me on LinkedIn at Lisa Duerre. It's Duerre. I tell people it rhymes with jury. Lisa Duerre rhymes with jury. And then the last thing I
Yes,
would say
thank
is
you
our
for yes,
podcast is a
yeah.
great way if you want to follow what we're saying. It's Ctrl+Alt+Delete with Lisa Duerre. Our hashtag is Real Talk with Lisa, so it's pretty easy to find.
Nice, nice. Lisa, thank you so much. This was a real pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I look forward to
Danny, thank
continuing
you
this
for
conversation with
everything
you.
that you do and for who you are and how you show up in the world. And thank you for having me at just this small moment in
Ah,
time where we could connect our hearts, our passions, and support your listeners because they're the glue. And I think it's really great that you have this out here for everybody.
yes.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Lisa. So appreciate it. And thank you, dear listener, for joining us on this episode for the Best Boss Bootcamp podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.